Welcome to Dear Business Coach, the podcast. My name's Elizabeth, coming to you from the Walker Consulting Work Studio. Find one thing to move your business forward today. With conversations, spotlights, interviews, articles, and free resources. Listen, follow, and subscribe on social media. Dear Business Coach Podcast. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. And don't forget Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. All it takes sometimes is one little thing to move your business forward today. And welcome to the Dear Business Coach Podcast. Margie, we are talking today to you because I want to know about effective team leadership. You have some insights today. They're going to help us get on the right path quickly. But also, you've been working on effective team leadership probably your whole life, and you have some personal history all the way back to telling us where our first teams start in our family life and our school life. So would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yep, Margie Oleson. I've launched Team Accelerator. I'm with Oleson Consulting, and it has been a lifelong passion. I didn't realize that at the time, but I came out of a childhood that had a lot of changes, a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. And when I went into the workplace, I noticed that some of the same issues were there. And that's when I realized how important it is to get it right at work, because most people are at work. I couldn't do anything about the leadership at home, and they didn't have a manual. And so it became my passion to help leaders become effective leaders, lead high-performing teams, which everybody wants to be on a high-performing team.
And so self-awareness is one of the first things that you really want to drive home that's important. Everybody wants to be an effective team leader, and we also have to be in check with how we communicate with ourselves, how we come off to other people. And so you say that self-awareness is part of that, or not part of it, but the beginning. If we are team leaders, if I'm a team leader, I feel a little bit, I let my ego lead a little bit because that's helpful in certain situations. And one of my first questions for myself is, if you tell me as an advisor that self-awareness is something I need to work on, I'm probably going to hear something from my ego about whether that's good or bad. And do you have any insight into how self-awareness and the training to start that it maybe starts with what we perceive as self-awareness? What is that?
Absolutely. So the way I define self-awareness is that I'm aware of my behavior and communications and how they are being received to others. And I'm aware of the behavior and communications of others and how they're being received by me. And that ego is the thing that has been keeping us alive. And so the ego has a great role in our lives, but once we become adults and we want to start developing, then we replace the ego, we develop, we grow it up. And so that our decisions are not based on self-preservation or survival, but rather we have expanded the way we think and what we know, and we're able to be more available to others. So the ego is really the self-focus. It really is I'm just going to take care of myself because who else is going to take care of me? And that is absolutely the right answer for a while. Children, young adults, at some point, we want to grow our self-awareness and become a mature adult, emotionally mature, so that we can do our number one job as leaders. Our number one best job is developing others. And it is really hard to develop others if I'm being triggered, feeling like I'm being attacked internally over and over again because my ego is undeveloped. And I will say to people that are listening, you may not realize you're in this boat. This is not something people are talking about openly on the golf course or at pickleball. You're not chatting about it with your friends or family necessarily. That ego may not even want you to know it yourself, because you get to a certain point where you've been promoted and you're in a leadership role, and your lifeline, your whole life depends on maybe the income, the place in your career, the way that you show up, and the thing that's going to happen next. And so how easy is it in that situation to just be open and honest and say, yeah, but how do I do this? You promoted me to be a leader, or you hired me in from the outside to be a leader. But what I know, looking at my own childhood and then all of my experiences, is we aren't developing leaders. We are asking them to know it and make it up as going along. And one thing about that, so we learn leadership from the leaders in our world, and it starts with whoever's around there when we're born, and whoever is in the household that's as we're growing up, those are leaders. And they didn't have leaders either. So whoever was teaching them was whoever was around in the household. So we've got a whole bunch of people that are making it up as they go along. And then when you go out into the workforce, you join some sports groups or some music, you get your first jobs. Those leaders also were not taught how to lead. And so everybody is learning it from the person before them who also didn't learn it. So my passion is to help people get it right so that they can go from there. And self-awareness is one of the biggest skills that you can have so that you can open up your mind and your ability to mature. And I like to think of the metaphor of the iceberg out in the middle of the ocean. So when you're coming up on an iceberg, you're going to see what is showing. So you're in a boat, so you're going to see the level of the iceberg that's showing based on where you're sitting. But underneath that waterline is a whole bunch more iceberg. And that iceberg, as a metaphor, are all the things that people don't see about me. Maybe I don't even see it myself. So above the waterline are the things that I show you. Today, I'm wearing a burnt orange shirt. You can see that. I might smile when I'm talking. That gives you some clues about how I feel. It might not be accurate, but it does give you some clues. If you come into my office and you see some sort of a religious artifact on the wall, you might get some information about that. If I tell you I'm really angry, that's above the waterline. You're able to see it. What's all underneath the waterline are my beliefs that I'm not sharing, my fears that I'm not talking about, my needs that I'm not articulating. And the goal for increasing your self-awareness is to do those things that move that water line to lower so that you're living more out loud with your beliefs and your fears and what you have to bring to the table. Maybe you're the kind of person who's quiet and they don't even realize all those strengths that you have under the waterline because you're not bringing them to the surface. And self-awareness, to grow your self-awareness, now that you're an adult and you're out doing things, kind of hard to say, well, how do I grow self-awareness? I didn't get it naturally in my development phases. What do I do now? Well, there are very specific things that you can do. Number one, you want to do what it'll take for you to be more aware of how your behavior and communications impacts others and theirs impacts you. Whatever that might be, whether you go after it, you hire a coach, you go to a therapist, you join a group, you get feedback about the things that you're doing and you practice. Another thing you need to do is, if you're not thinking about the people that you're leading as bringing their humanness to work, then you are keeping underneath the waterline, first of all, your own humanness, but theirs, and that's not realistic. You can't do that. You can't force people to leave their humanness at the door. Now, we don't have to sit all day long and talk about our feelings, but when you're engaging in how you lead and develop people, and you're thinking about them and their whole humanness, you recognize they have their own iceberg. They have their own waterline. They have their own self-awareness needs. And so when we apply what I finally figured out, the art and science of leadership and team development, when we apply those principles, that's another way that we grow our self-awareness. The more you learn about how to be good at being a leader, your self-awareness grows naturally. That's good news.
What would be one of the first steps that I take? You say engaging in therapy. If I'm already talking to you, then I am looking for coaching. So that's the first step.
That is a first step.
And what if what if I'm a team leader within an organization and I know that I want to improve these skills and I'm looking for the growth that you offer, but maybe I'm not sure if the organization I work for is necessarily going to see that value. Is it worth me coming to you on my own and studying this anyway?
Absolutely. And through my research, trying to figure all this out, you can be a high performing team in a pool of a bigger organization that's not very effective. For about 12 to 18 months, people can be in a bubble and do their thing. Eventually, you're going to have turnover, or you're going to need resources of your own leadership or the rest of the organization. But for a while, you can grow your own leadership and a high performing team in your own bubble in an organization. I want to say something about coaching. So I had a client who was with a coach for 2 years, and they met almost weekly. And this client brought me in because of a transformation that wasn't gaining traction, and they wanted to be very concrete about how to fix it. But when I explored a little bit about those coaching sessions that they had, this leader could not tell me concretely anything they've been able to learn or change, actually take action. So maybe they feel like they learned, but they weren't able to translate into action even after 2 years. So the kind of coaching that you're looking for is very direct with you, very honest. You put together a program that builds on the things that you need to have in place, but then there's continuous feedback about what is said to be what you're going after, what you are doing about that, and how it's going. And when you don't have a coach that's doing that, this particular leader was feeling good, really, really good about those sessions. They got to affirm that they're okay in the universe and that they're doing a great job. But on some level, they were not building their self-awareness because they weren't doing anything new. And their people, their programs, their projects were stalled. And people were struggling to be on the team and looking to be on other teams, and the leader didn't even know what they should do about it. You want a coach who can mirror it and talk to you and be realistic. And the good news about that type of coaching is that's how you want to lead as well. You want to become the leader who's leading out loud. You're talking openly. You're very clear with your team what you're going after. So here are my goals. So let's say you're a division leader and you're a part of a broader organization, or you're a middle manager and you have a team that's a part of a broader division. You are really clear with your team members about what our goals are, what my goals are as the leader. And you and each of team members are really clear together. At the same time, they tell the same story about what those goals are, what the current priorities are, and then what each team member and their own teams are working on to help achieve those goals. What I just described, most leaders don't have that kind of clarity. Now, if I say, okay, pull your people together and ask them. If you do that, they're gonna be able to teach, study to the test. But if you ask them off the top of their heads and to jot it down, let's say there's 8 people in the meeting, ask them, hey, what are my goals? And jot that down. And then what is your place in our team meeting our goals? Have them jot that down and then have them share. And assure them you're not trying to catch them. You're not trying to test them so that you can do a performance management plan or move them out because they're wrong. You're going to find out that even everyone that's been in the same conversations, reading the same emails, going through the same work, is hearing it and seeing it differently. And that's one of the reasons their boat is rowing in a direction that's not in the direction of your goals, or you got 2 teams rowing in the same direction, doing the same thing, and there's a gap over here. When you work on that kind of clarity, you're actually growing your self-awareness. You're becoming a better leader because you're learning what it takes. And that kind of clarity is what's getting in the way of a lot of your challenges right now, but you don't think that's it. You think it's the market, or you think it's the company that you're in, or you think it's the people that you've assembled. The truth is, when we have 8 people and they all have a different view of the same thing, and then and it's autopilot. It's not the thing that if you sent them an email and say, what are my goals? Well, they can look around and find them. Oh, I know this, and they can go back to a document and they can write them to you. But that's not their autopilot. That's not what's motivating them. That's below their waterline are all the things they think about what they're supposed to be doing. And so when you help them be clear, off the top of their head where they should be and what they should be doing, you have a chance to turn the ship a little bit to get people going in the same direction. Most leaders do not have that, and they don't realize it. They're not checking for it, and they're not leading for it.
So I need some tools to learn how to check in with my team and see if
Yes,
they're catching what I'm saying. How do I start to test myself and that self-awareness process to know how my communication is
yes.
affecting my team? How do I know what I sound like and how I'm heard or not?
So I would say one of the first rules of self-awareness is get comfortable with your own humanness. You're not going to get this right the first time, and you're never going to lead perfectly. And you don't want to expect your team to lead perfect, to be team members perfectly. And they have a right to grow their self-awareness too and be human. And so just know that you're going to move from wherever you're at today to a different, newer place, and you're going to learn some things, but it's not a judgment. It's not a value that we're saying, you didn't add value before. Let's see if we can move this along for you. No, it's really, you did the very best you could. And one thing about the brain, so I always coach leaders dealing with the realities of the brain. So we have about 60,000 to 100,000 thoughts a day. And almost all of them, we're not thinking them. They're just happening to us, kind of like breathing is happening to us. So the brain loves old and familiar. And so when you get up in the morning and when your team members get up in the morning, they're not coming to work trying to resist the changes you're wanting to make. They're not coming to work trying to gum up the works. 99.99% of what they do every day is autopilot. So we start with let yourself off the hook. You have habits throughout the day for how you show up to work and how you do your meetings and how you lead. And so we're going to come in, we're going to meet your self-awareness level where it is. And then we're going to build on it. And I launched Team Accelerator, and that has systems and processes in place that create the foundation that we can do all of this. And so the way that you're leading right now and the way to get started on this approach is you're going to tell your team, hey, we're working on some stuff. We want to focus on kind of how we behave with each other. We have these challenges, we have these wins, we want to build on those. And one of the ways that we can do that is to talk about behavior, talk about how we're organized, talk about how we can be an even more cohesive group. And then you can tell them. And one of the ways is we want to start to ask questions and get out of our heads what we're thinking. And I want you to feel comfortable. I'm not trying to do this for you to notice or for others to notice that you're wrong and so that you could be fired. So you want to lay a foundation of, we're going to do some stuff. And by the way, it's not going to be natural. 60 to 100,000 thoughts a day, and they're all on their own. We're going to start to intentionally lead some of those thoughts, and it's going to take a process. And then without warning to them, now you've got them in a mode where they know that we're starting to do some things. Now you, in one of your meetings, or you schedule an offsite because you have offsites periodically. And I did this with a client. They brought me in. They had been together for a year working. There were just 4 of them, and they were not getting traction on this big transformation. They brought me in. I said, okay. So we came together. We had a few hours together, and I didn't give them a warning. I didn't even get the leader a warning. And I just asked them to jot down each of the 4 people, 3 of the direct reports that had their own teams, and then the leader. Write down what the main goals are for this transformation, and write down a few bullets for how you're going to get there, and then write down what your team's part is in that. They were shocked when we revealed, when they each went around, even the leader, 4 people that had just spent a year together, literally sitting side by side, and they had different views. And they got emotional and they laughed and they got a little teary-eyed. They couldn't believe that inside their head could be so different from the person that they've gone to lunch with and celebrated birthdays with and worked on this day in and day out. So each of those leaders were going back and telling their team something different. And they had these huge gaps. And instead of me being able to tell them which processes they should do to fix the literal transformation gaps, we talked about how to set up their communication so that they are starting to take more time in meetings to pause near the end and align on what we just said. And not everything. You don't want to have to record it and then hit play. You say, you start your meeting or end your before you end your meetings with, here are the decisions we made. And then everybody, yep, that's what I heard. And you're sharing your desktop or you're on a whiteboard, whatever it needs to be, so that people can see it, so their brains can see it, so they can make sense of it. Here are the questions that were raised that we're going to take from here and answer. Yep, that's what, no, actually, I was thinking we were talking about that other thing. Oh, let's clear that up right now. And then the third thing is, here's who volunteered for what. When you can use your time together, you're starting that way and doing it more intentionally, taking a little bit more time talking about openly, that water line is going down. You're starting to do more individually and as a group to say what's in my mind and what I thought we said. And then this person over here can compare notes. And the beauty of that, not only do you become a much better leader and a much better cohesive team, you're growing self-awareness by doing that as well. So it is important to go off to therapy. It is important to become more connected and to work through some things that have been holding you back, baggage that you have, emotional heaviness. And the more you do this clarity work, and check assumptions and be more out loud about, hey, let's get together on the same page, you're actually growing your self-awareness by leaps and bounds.
It sounds like a fascinating process. Just I think that you as a coach, I would feel comfortable with you being there in the room with me at the beginning of this process so that I don't feel like I'm on a roller coaster, because it sounds exciting, but it also sounds like, oh no, I'm going to uncover some things in my personal emotions about my effectiveness or lack thereof as a leader in front of my team. And
Yes.
maybe you are also, you kind of feel like a therapist in the room inadvertently a little bit, it sounds like.
And I've had a lot of therapy, but I'm also a professional coach. I do not do therapy, and I do not even pretend to sneak a little bit of therapy in there. What I do is help make it safe in the moment as the human things are going up and down. It's going well, it's not going well, it's messy. This is messy. And if you needed to lead and your team needs to feel like it's not messy, then you really are asking people to leave their humanness at the door. You're asking yourself to leave your humanness in the door. You want meetings to feel a little chaotic and unplanned and messy. That's why you check before you end to gain clarity and wrangle it in. But when there's moments where it starts to feel like it's gone off in a direction that is not healthy or it's not safe, then I can be there to pause, and then I can talk to the leader later and recommend to them some things that they can do that are strategies to go and seek professionals. And they don't have to. There are some people that take their time. It's really hard for certain types of individuals. They're type A. They got to the role that they're in because they haven't been to therapy, because they don't talk about their feelings, because they're hard charging. When they feel they have some of these moments and they start to have successes without it blowing up or without it falling apart, then they may start to trust, oh, therapy is something I can do, or join a mastermind group where you can be more honest with a few peers and a professional that's facilitating. Somewhere in your life, you want a place to share with at least one other person some of those things that you haven't been talking about more openly. If for no other reason, because when you're talking to someone else and sharing, you're actually hearing it. So when you're talking to a coach, or you're talking to a life partner, or you're talking in a mastermind group, or you go to a therapist, or you join a 12-step group, when you talk out loud, you're leading your brain. You're hearing it. You're saying every morning, no, we're not just going to go back to the default settings. I'm learning some things and I'm practicing some things and I'm starting to get my head around those things, and that takes time. And so in the coaching, the part of what I learned in school about the art and science of leadership is we have expected people to go to a 2-day workshop and learn leadership. You cannot hire a coach and get this all worked out in 2 days. This takes time. So we put in place the art and the science, what we know, and the least amount. You can say, well, I've got 27 things I need to work on, or I need to have 35 goals. By the way, that's the first thing we change is you cannot have 35 goals. You may have that on paper, but you're not working toward 35 goals. But then also in the way that we approach this, build and start somewhere. And then, so it's kind of like a cadence of learn the knowledge, update the database and start to insist that the brain is being led by you on some of these things. And then put the systems and processes in place and get people to start to follow those. Practice. So now I'm teaching, you're learning as the leader, and the team is learning. And we do a lot of things around styles, take assessments, but we never do a case study. We always work with the actual work they're doing. And then eventually I'm observing, but I'm not leading or facilitating. And then eventually, as time is going by, I'm not even observing everything. And now I'm a phone a friend. And so it's a logical sequence so that if you can imagine, you start with me doing a lot of the giving you information and coaching, and then eventually yours ramps up as my ramps down. And that's the piece that's been missing is leaders. If you've tried to outsource it to HR, if you had a former leader that was really had high expectations, you might think you're not even supposed to admit, I want to know how to be a better leader. We're saying, okay, let's talk in the background. You do want to be a better leader, and here's how I can help you. And everything you do, think of it as making the world a better place for about 500 people. Let's say you have 6 team members. Each of those team members has a world of 5 to 15 people that it matters how it goes when they go to work. You do that work as a leader to grow your own leadership and develop a team that is cohesive and performs well together. You're teaching them. You become the leader that teaches them how to be a high-performing leader, which they didn't have up to now. And so you're starting to be the solution instead of living in the world that was a part of the problem.
Well, and it sounds too like you are getting to a place where you can be human with your team so that we can get to what you say are the non-negotiables. So I'm going to say, repeat back to you kind of in a condensed version. We started with 35 goals. If we walk into a meeting and just say, okay, we're going to have an effective meeting today, that means now we're just talking about non-negotiables. Okay, problem solved. Our meeting's more effective, right? No, we have to go and do the human part first, do the teamwork first, do the effective leadership, effective communication first, so that we can get to what those actual goals are that matter rather than a long list of things that are.
Yes, and once you get through that and you start to develop traction, you start to get really good at that, now you can tackle some things that have been on the back burner. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, rolling out a new product, moving, solving the supply chain issues. So people think we've got these big issues now and they're just way beyond us. Actually, they're beyond you, even though you've got people on your team right now that are skilled at these things, particularly gifted. But you're not hearing from them because there's no place in the day when you're fighting fires all the time. Your meetings are terrible. You're not comfortable. They're not comfortable. You're not getting to time and space to go a little deeper and really benefit from the creativity and the brilliance that's in your group, and bringing in more people that are brilliant and have that creativity and innovation to be able to solve some of those problems. You're actually solving the same problems over and over again. And what I hear from leaders is, well, that's how organizations are. I'm saying that's true, and it doesn't have to be that way. And meetings, terrible meetings. So Forbes calls terrible meetings an $85 billion problem every year in the US. I can teach you today how to solve your meetings. But to what the point you just made, the meetings approach is not the problem, although there are a few things you need to do, and you need to do those, because if you don't do those, it's going to be a problem. But the other thing that's happening is underneath your behaviors, your dynamics, the absence of clarity, the non-negotiables. Until you get those in place, your meetings will continue to be a reflection of those challenges. So fix some of those other things, get them in place, and then follow the format for a high-performing meeting, which you probably can already recite. You just say, yeah, but does it work? It doesn't work because you've got some of these fundamental pieces that are not in place. So that's exactly what I hear you saying, and that is correct.
So we can make new habits as well. Can we make, if we can learn effective communication, can we really can we really self-evaluate and continue to reinforce those habits for ourselves once you are a little more hands-off? in the coaching process?
Yes, and you have to. So, that 99.99% every day, those are habits. So we say, well, let's have a leader do 9 things, but we don't realize, take away that list, if you don't have it sitting right in front of your eyes, actually everything they do all day as a leader are habits. And how do you change a habit? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? We now know the science of what to do about habits. James Clear, we talk about culture, eating your strategy for breakfast. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. Your habits are eating your goals for lunch. Your habits are eating your dynamics of your team and high performance for lunch. And so we put in place a system, and all that practicing is because the habits are not going to change readily. But as you go after them, so we know how to develop habits, but at work, we're not talking about that. But that could be the most important thing that you use. And once you start to do that, then you learn to your own approach around habits. You want your own approach around habits in life, both personal, professional, whatever. You're going to grow the ability to approach habits in a way that helps you. And so you start small. So we put in place our program for starting small, and then it just builds and it builds and it builds. And there are some problems that you have right now as a leader in a team, those will immediately correct. So you're going to find a lot of success right away for certain things. And then we're going to go deeper on aspects that are habits that are more stubborn. Why? Because of any one of a number of reasons. So we're going to explore those. So you can be forgiven for your habits being set and for them to be hard to change on your own if you don't realize all the other things that you may need to focus on and address so that you can change those habits.
Are there a couple of habits that we all kind of have in terms of blocking ourselves from being effective communicators? For example, in a meeting, the way we enter a room, the first thing we say to our team when we address a room. Are there some examples of something that are just kind of helpful in speech, words that we use, body language that we use that can set us in the right direction, for example?
Yep. So related to communications for leaders, probably the habit that has done the most damage, but we've learned it all naturally because everybody's doing it. So we learn from our leaders and we do it, is we do not over communicate. By definition, we are under communicating. And so it's one of the first things that I coach leaders on. They will add to their toolkit over communicating. And there's a lot of reasons why leaders don't over communicate. It's boring, quite frankly. So if I have 3 goals and I really want the water line to go down, 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 and my team members to be clear and to be aligned, they have to really know my goals the way they know how to tie their shoes. And that doesn't happen the first time I communicate. And so I have to over communicate and over communicate and over communicate. And to me, it sounds like it's way over and above what is needed. But to the receiver, I might have heard it 3 times, but the 3rd time might sound like the first time to me inside my head. That old marketing adage, 7 times 7 ways, is because the brain is like flicking off all the stuff you're sending it so it can keep you alive. And so you need a thing to be repeated a few times and in different ways, stories, visuals, listening to it, watching it, so that the brain finally goes, fine, it sounds like this is important. I will lean in and I will commit real estate to the precious survival real estate to this thing that you're trying to learn. So that would be one way to make sure that your people learn those 3 goals, is you're going to do the 7 times 7 ways, and you're just going to accept, and you're going to develop your skills and your habits, accepting that over communication is one of the greatest strategies of a leader. And then the coming into a meeting, this is really important because there's a lot of different information about out there how to have an effective meeting. And I'm going to say something that sounds a little counterintuitive. Number 1, there are just 3 things you want to make sure you do to have a high-performing meeting. And the first one is make sure you have an agenda and only have the right people in the room that need to be a part of that agenda. You're going to have to conquer some of your politics at work. You're going to have to conquer some of your FOMO, the fear of missing out. You're going to have to conquer some of your habits. So the habit is, no, these people come to this meeting. Well, first of all, the habit is you even have the meeting. You shouldn't be having meetings because it's a habit. And then you want only the right people in your meetings, and you separate out strategy from tactics. So don't have an operations meeting about the day-to-day tactics, the fires you're putting out, and have someone bring up a long-term strategy, and vice versa. So you want to make sure your agenda is appropriate to what you need to make happen, and you only invite the people who are needed for that conversation. And when you start the meeting, and here's the counterintuitive part, you don't say to people, hey, what else should we have on the agenda? You think you're being nice. You think you're being an open leader. You think you're trying to not miss some big, thing that it was not on your radar. But really what you've done is you've just thrown all high-performing meetings approach out the window. Because if you add something to the meeting and you don't have the right people there, well, now you've got failure at the beginning, number one. And then number two, you're not prepared for it. And that's not the thing that's going to help you. Okay, so that's number one, is don't change the agenda. Make sure you have the right people for the agenda, and then pause, and then track the decisions, the pieces that we were talking about, and then pause 5 minutes early so that you can check for assumptions. All of that I just said helps you learn what things should be communicated and what things you don't have to worry about. Once you start to develop the clarity with your team, because you're doing your meetings that way, and you're over communicating about your goals, and you're over communicating about who's supposed to be doing what, and you're over communicating about the status and the progress, what you think, and then checking with them, your communication skills go way up very quickly, and you start to develop different habits. Your communications are also habits. It'll start to seem more logical later. We're kind of in a kind of a floating, communicate from the hip. Once you get a lot more intentional about how we do this and how we do it together, your communications start to skyrocket.
You get practice at the verbiage and the back and forth, and you start to get comfortable with self-correcting in a conversation if you can notice that it's not where you wanted to go. So at the end of a meeting, I heard you say, and you correct me if I misunderstood you, you said check for assumptions, in the meeting 5 minutes early. So one thing that I have said in meetings and hear a lot from other leaders, like you say, we learn from other people that we're watching be leaders, is we end the meeting with, everybody good? And so that's what I thought of when you said check for assumptions. How do I ask that?
So I don't need to know if everybody's good.
Right.
I don't even know. If I ask 10 people, are you good? 10 people are going to take that differently and think about it differently. And I know that in corporate speak, they all have to say, yes, I'm fine, because that's the rule. So I'm not sure I got anything out of asking my question. But we want to train the brain and develop habits for being really clear about the things that we want to focus on. So my thinking about whether I'm good, I mean, right now in the world of remote, we have a lot of people that are on meetings and they're loafing. They're multitasking, they're doing other things there, or they're getting comfortable. They've developed habits to just sit there. They don't prepare for the meeting. They come to the meeting because they have so many on their calendar and they just show up. You want the opposite. And as you start to do that, and as you start to get more organized, when you end 5 minutes early and you say, here are the decisions we made, check, 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 check. Here are the questions that came out of this meeting that we're going to move into the future and we're going to answer, check, 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 check. And somebody said, oh, wait, I thought we asked. So then you add that to the list. Oh, good. Thank you for clarifying that. We add that question. We thought we had 5 questions. Now there are 6. And then who said they were going to do what? When you get people who keep not doing the follow through they volunteered for, they could be the nicest people. They could be difficult to work with. It doesn't matter. If they're not following through, their self-awareness is stuck and my own self-awareness is stuck, because we're just all letting that happen. So you want to say who volunteered for what. And even that is a show of clarity. And then I don't need people to define for me their happiness and tell me that they're happy at work. I promise you, the data, the science, and my own experience, when you start to develop that kind of clarity about the limited list of goals, and you separate out strategy and tactics in meetings, and your meetings improve, and you increase clarity about what we just said, and people start to have the same view of things, they love coming to work. They love being on the team. You don't have to build engagement. Engagement happens. You don't have to build productivity. Productivity happens because you have shed the unnatural parts of the human experience and you've built on the skills and developed new habits. And these people would never go back to their old way. And at some point, leaders are like, oh, I just cannot believe I suffered for so long, or I can't believe that my meetings were so terrible for so long. And it's just because they just didn't know. People want to have clarity and they want to feel like they're aligned and they want to know that they are working towards something with you and that their part is working. And then the other thing we do is while they're doing that, we work on talking about behaviors. We need to talk out loud about behaviors. If you're gossiping, if you've got people gossiping on your team to their own teams about you as the leader, you have a big problem. It's less about market challenges for you and your company. It is more about the behaviors. So we want to get to the point where we talk about that openly, we check each other, we talk about communication, we grow it, and it starts to feel a lot calmer and a lot more productive. And so then people really are good, but we don't have to ask because we always want to be aiming for the next going higher up the mountain, more challenges, more opportunities. Great, because we're not solving the same problems over and over again and continuing to fight fires.
Right. It feels good to get things done finally. Yay.
Check those off the list so you can do even more, bigger, better.
Make room. Well, and I also heard you say that you are a discerner. You have spoken about your assessments that you have
Working
gone through.
genius.
The working genius.
I think that so Patrick Lencioni and the Table Group have developed Working Genius. It's now been out for a couple of years. It's an amazing assessment. I use it with all of my clients. And it's 6 profiles and you have 2 geniuses, a couple competencies and a couple of frustrations. And it makes the acronym WIDGET. Wonder, people that ask a lot of questions, invention, people that actually make solutions. And then D for discerner is, okay, I don't think that solution is going to work, or that solution is going to be great. And then G is galvanizing the people that actually pull the people together to go and initiate and make happen, execute this great idea that now has been discerned. And then the enablement folks know how things get done. That's their genius. And the tenacity folks really like to check things off the list. And so we don't know. It sounds like some of that is we're hardwired for that. The beauty of doing an assessment like that and the beauty of getting in touch with where you're at is everybody wants to be a discerner. So they go into the test and they say, well, I know I'm a discerner. Well, you may be good at discerning, you may like discerning, and you're great at galvanizing and enabling. And that's where you should spend a lot of your time because that's where joy surfaces for you when you're working with other people. For me, it was wonder, asking a lot of questions, and discerning, giving a lot of opinions. And I got a lot of flack for both of those most of my life. And so it took me until I really understood what was happening, that those are my natural gifts. Those are my natural geniuses. The way that discerning is described is that we really cannot tell you how we came to it. It reminds me of 4th grade, and my math teacher always wanted me to show my work. And sometimes I hadn't learned it well enough to show my work, but I had the right answer. And I honestly didn't know why. So I do think that discernment, the way we have it, in that context of a working genius, is somewhat hardwired. And then I think I was able to learn it as I went along, as it became the place that I spent more time. So it was really hard for me as a child to just leave to everybody else how my day was going to go because of all that chaos and all of that, the moving and moving. So I finally had to develop some strategies for making friends, for doing well in school, for starting something new, being in a new neighborhood. And all of that gave me practice at using what were some of my natural talents of getting information about what's going on, that other people don't have that information. And what I will say about that is, that's okay. You do the assessment, you figure out where your team is at, and then you pull in the people that you need for certain aspects of it. But rather than continuously hitting yourself over the head for not being a discerning type person, but you're so good at enablement, that's where you want to spend your time. And then let's get the discerning piece taken care of. So rather than judging and making everybody be the talented person in a certain area. Let's see where we are, and then let's pull in, because widget spells the life cycle of something new, from the time you ask the question all the way to the time that you finish it. And many groups suffer budget-wise, projects-wise, schedule-wise, because they live in the WID too long. They're spinning and they're spinning. We got ideas, more ideas, more ideas. No. Or you execute, you pull the people in, you enable, you execute, and it wasn't the right product, or it wasn't the right service, or it wasn't the right change. But you have people somewhere inside that probably knew that, but you weren't tapping them. So it's a life cycle of how you can do things. I love it. I'll do a pun. It's genius.
And that is something that you are actually, you're working on getting the message out on that right now, aren't you?
Yes, I'm certified. So I'm a practitioner. And to me, I'm familiar. So we do several assessments when I work with a client. We'll do DISC, and we'll do, I have a team assessment, and then we'll do Working Genius. But in my 4 decades in corporate America, this is by far the best assessment that I've come across, because it doesn't try to tap into your personality for things that you would have to go off to therapy to explore or whatever. It's very easy. It's very understandable. It resonates right away. And it is the life cycle of what you're trying to do at work every day. So it is the most applicable. And then what I love about Lencioni, so Lencioni is the 5 dysfunctions of a team. 20 years ago, he did The Advantage in 2012. And he talks about it being a thing that can surface joy for people at work. Now, we don't talk about joy at work much, but what it does is it's kind of like a sculptor that they just peeled away the stuff. You peel away the unpleasant, you peel away the things that don't fit you, you fix your meetings and start to stop those fires and having to solve the same problems over and again. You peel away the lack of clarity and the lack of alignment. And underneath there somewhere is a little bit of fun, a little bit of joy, a little bit of motivation to go back to work. We're missing that, and it's not unrealistic. It's not foo-foo. It is strategic, and it happens when you've got your life cycle going in the right direction. And if you invite me to a meeting and I start to discern, and you say, Margie, we've already done that. We're in the stage where we're actually building the product now. And so it's not like, oh, I just did a bad thing. Oh, I did the thing I do. But we're a team, and we're good at that, and it's safe for them to say, you're not needed, and I'm safe at going, okay, I'm going to go somewhere and discern somewhere else.
Well, and so you knew that about yourself, and so that way in that meeting at that moment, you could say, oh, you're right. I was just really excited I had to say that.
Yes. And until you build your self-awareness more, I might dig in my heels and say, yeah, no, you all, and I might resist. Because I got to learn too. And then when there's enough safety and the leader can lead it, we really want to get through those 6 cycles. Otherwise, we are constantly not getting traction. And that's why we're not meeting our goals or our budgets. And we didn't even think that. We thought it was something completely different. So this really lays nicely onto the building blocks for the processes and systems that you need. It works really well to have safe, non-judgmental, non-flashlight focusing on your personality conversations about how we talk to each other and how we behave with each other.
Well, thank you for taking a couple extra minutes with me. And I can go to your LinkedIn page, Margie.Oleson, and start a conversation with you if I want to.
And that'd be great. And today you can go to topteamaccelerator.com, topteamaccelerator.com, and take a free team assessment. And it doesn't require you to share your data or get your answers from someone else. It's all done right there, and no one will know your answers except you. And then there are some instructions, some recommendations for what you can do today based on how you scored. Those 15 statements that you're going to answer are what you want to have in place to be a cohesive, high-performing team and be able to lead it. And you can just take the assessment today in the privacy of your own space.
Well, Margie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll put the links to Top Accelerator in the show notes, of course, and leave us with anything else I should know about how to get in touch with you.
No, Margie.Oleson on LinkedIn. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Elizabeth, coming to you from the Walker Consulting Work Studio in Floyd, Virginia. This has been an episode of Dear Business Coach.